Bachman! Bachman! Previously on How Classic, Bach was hired as the master of chapel choir in the courts of Cöthen, but his former employer, the Duke of Weimar, refused to let Bach go and threw Bach in jail. 1 month later, however, the Duke of Weimar finally decided to release Bach. So in 1717, Bach began his Cöthen period. Bach's employer was a young prince named Leopold, who was a Calvinist, meaning he rarely used church music, meaning normally Bach, a Lutheran, would have had no job and soon starved to death in Cöthen. But thankfully, the prince was like, some secular music would be nice. In fact, the prince loved music and could even play several instruments, and he played freely and informally with his court musicians, treating them as his fellows. Therefore, Bach lived a happy life in Cöthen with a very good relationship with the prince and enjoying the position of the master of chapel choir, the highest rank for musicians in Baroque period. In 1719, Bach traveled to Halle to meet another great Baroque composer none other than Georg Friedrich Händel, but Händel had left when Bach arrived. Another attempt to meet Händel would be made in 1730, but also failed. Therefore, despite being born in the same year and both being the greatest composers in Baroque period, Bach and Händel never met each other. Did somebody say, travel? Said the prince, who loved traveling, and he would bring his court musicians, including Bach, as well as some instruments whenever he traveled. Phew, what a wonderful trip, said Bach after the trip to the city of Carlsbad. Honey, I'm home! Honey? Unfortunately, Bach's wife, Maria, suddenly died during his trip, leaving 4 motherless children. In Cöthen period, Bach composed mostly secular music, such as many of his suites. If you haven't seen my video about Baroque period and don't know what a suite is, basically it's a set of dance music, usually including these 4. But people don't really dance to these music, but they're still called dance music, so it's kind of like a try not to dance challenge for the audience. Here are some of the suites Bach composed. And here are some movements from those suites that are particularly famous. Prelude from Cello Suite No. 1. Chaconne from Partita for Violin No. 2. Preludio from Partita for Violin No. 3. Gavotte Chanhong-du from Partita for Violin No. 3. Another notable set of musical works of Bach written in Cöthen period is the 6 concertos known today as the Brandenburg Concertos. Now people might hear the word concerto and think about large-scale musical works of a solo instrument accompanied by an entire orchestra. But keep in mind that we are now in Baroque period, meaning these classical music terms still had several different meanings. The Brandenburg concertos are concerto grosso, meaning they are kind of like large-scale chamber music. As Bach described, 6 concertos for several instruments. Here are some fun facts about the Brandenburg concertos. Fun fact number 1. These 6 concertos possibly took several years for Bach to compose. They were finished in Cotton period, but some suspect that some portions of them were written back in Weimar period. Fun fact number 2, the second movement of Brandenburg Concerto number 3 consists of only one single measure with 2 chords. Fun fact number 3, Bach presented these concertos to the Margrave of Brandenburg, intended to get the job in Brandenburg. However, there is no evidence of the Margrave actually receiving nor listening to the concertos, which is unfortunate for the Margrave for missing such wonderful pieces of music. In these concertos, Bach used some quite unusual combinations of instruments, but not only managed to make them sound brilliant, but also allowed these instruments to have their chances to solo. Therefore, the Brandenburg concertos are considered some of the best orchestral works in Baroque period. And speaking of Bach's greatest works in Cotton period, we definitely cannot overlook the Well-Tempered Clavier, which consists of 24 preludes and fugues for all 24 keys. Now you might have heard of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier before, but wonder, why did Bach compose all these preludes and fugues for every key? Why do all professional musicians have to study about the Well-Tempered Clavier? What makes the Well-Tempered Clavier so significant? Why? What? Why? Well, to answer these questions, we have to go back to 10,000 years ago. Introducing the biggest hit song in prehistory. Yeah, probably something sounds like that, we will never know. But the point I'm trying to make here is there wasn't any concepts of notes and keys. They needed a mastermind to come up with a clear tuning system. Thankfully, here comes one who is none other than the famous Pythagoras, who came up with the Pythagorean tuning system. The problem of tuning, however, was far from solved. In Renaissance period, there were so many different tuning systems for different instruments, with so many different flaws in every individual tuning system, and you can imagine how disastrous it would be for them to try to perform together. Some crazy solutions were invented, such as a 19-keys keyboard instruments like this. They needed a mastermind to come up with a clear tuning system. Thankfully, here comes one who is none other than the famous Galileo Galilei. No, actually his father, Vincenzo Galilei, as well as a Chinese guy named Zhu Zaiyu, came up with quite similar and both effective tuning systems. In 18th century, while all these different tuning systems were flying around, was just in time for Bach to pick up a tuning system and composed 24 preludes and fugues for all 24 keys. It is still argued that which tuning system exactly did Bach use, but no matter which it is, Bach had proven that this tuning system could work even on complicated music like fugue without sounding inharmonic. 20 years later, Bach would compile another set of 24 preludes and fugues. Together, these two sets of preludes and fugues are known as the Well-Tempered Clavier Book 1 and Book 2. The Well-Tempered Clavier not only proved that a new tuning system could work, but also is an invaluable source of polyphonic masterpieces for music theorists to study. In addition, the Well-Tempered Clavier is also a good set of pieces for keyboardists to practice and perform. As Bach describes in the first book, for the profit and use of musical youth desirous of learning, and especially for the pastime of those already skilled in this study. Thus, the Well-Tempered Clavier is widely considered one of the most important musical works in history. Despite all these achievements, Bach wasn't happy. The loss of his wife hit him hard. He couldn't stop thinking about Maria, who he had loved for over a decade. He needed someone to fill the void. Someone that would love him and take care of his children.
Wow, what an exciting place to work in. Hello, new friend. I'm your new colleague. I'm going to work here as a singer. My name's Anna. It is very nice to
Will you
meet
marry me?
you. Okay.
And so, Bach and a young singer by the name of Anna Magdalena Wilke were married in 1721. Anna was a very nice mother to Bach's children. She was a professional singer, but also desired to learn to play the keyboard. So in 1722, Bach made a collection of pieces for Anna to practice, which is known as Notebook for Anna Magdalena Bach. And in 1722, Bach made the second notebook. These notebooks contain some pieces composed by Bach himself, but also some that were composed by someone else, such as the famous Minuet in G. Yes, you heard it right. This famous Minuet in G that you have probably had learned as a piano student was actually not composed by Bach, but possibly by another composer named Christian Petzold. But anyway, speaking of marriage, the prince also got married. But it's rather a bad thing for Bach because the new princess was not a fan of the prince and Bach's music. In addition, Bach wanted his sons to have good education, but Cöthen just wasn't a good place for it. So again, Bach wanted to live somewhere else. After the failed attempt to get a job in Brandenburg, Bach turned his eyes to an opening in Leipzig. At St. Thomas School, the cantor had recently died and they were looking for the replacement. Initially, they were about to hire another great composer by the name of Georg Philipp Telemann. Telemann accepted the offer, and so the next episode of How Classic will be the life and masterpieces of Georg Philipp Telemann in Leipzig. Except no, Telemann did not accept the offer because of failing to leave his previous job. And then they tried to hire another guy but also failed. So the only candidate we have left is this Johann Sebastian Bach? Whatever. It's not like he will be known as one of the greatest composers of all time or anything, but let's hire him, I guess. So Bach successfully became the cantor of St. Thomas School in Leipzig. The Prince of Cöthen was pretty sad about Bach's departure, but still allowed Bach to leave. At least he didn't imprison him. So Bach went to Leipzig and lived there for the rest of his life, creating hundreds of masterpieces. If you want to learn more about Bach's Leipzig period, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel, then I'll see you next time.